Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix, running just a bit behind today. Normally we start at 9/11 to commemorate 9/11, not in the same way that other entities commemorate 9/11. We do it in our own unique brand and fashion, which is 9/11 was a total scam, total sham. And anybody that has spent any significant amount of time looking into the event will know it and understand it. Unfortunately, most people don't want to because, and here's the reason why. This is the big candy bar. This is the perfect burrito. It's because during that time, most people were taken in by what happened, and they were consumed by the trauma. And to the point where they believed that what had happened in a way that the media, the mass media, and the government party line was telling them how it unfolded. And for many people to go back and re-examine that and change their attitude or change their belief or change their opinion around it would require a major retrofit of their psyche and consciousness, and most people just don't want to do that. Most people just can't go there for any number of reasons. Well, they could say, well, it's over, it's done, it doesn't matter now, we just move on with our lives, which is kind of a realistic take in some ways. However, to be quite honest and clear, is that everything we've experienced since then has been a result of what happened then. Everything, and I mean everything, in a fairly significant way. So, yeah, you can just get on with your life, but your life is going to continue to degrade from a collective standpoint. Now, some people will say, well, Las Vegas didn't impact my life, or the Boston Marathon. By the way, they're making a movie out of the Boston Marathon. I went to the movies for the first time in a long time the other night, and I saw Blade Runner for 2049, which I'm going to do a piece on the website. And it was very interesting watching the movies or the previews before Blade Runner. So the one preview I saw was for a movie about two strangers who wind up becoming stranded in a kind of an Arctic version of the Rockies, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the two actors are played by Idris Elba, and I forget who the woman is, but she's blonde, she's white, he's black, and of course we have to have this now as part of the diversity programming. It's essential, it's everywhere, it's pervasive. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're strangers, they share a plane, it's a private plane, they have to get somewhere, and the plane goes down over the Rockies. I believe it is a retelling of a story of two people who were stranded. I've seen the little mini TV documentary of these two people. They were stranded in the backcountry deep in California, if I'm not mistaken, and they were strangers, and they had to get through 10 days of being together, and they were finally rescued. There's some very interesting plot twists and turns in that story. But in that version, and again, I'm making just a kind of a notice, a generalized notice. I'm not making any kind of sort of personal bias, but I'm just telling you that in that story, the people were of the same race complexion. It's retold, and they become different people, they become different characters. So we can see that there is this kind of diversity programming that's taking place across the media. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, I get it. All right, I don't know how it's going to end, but we can see where this movie is going. Okay, so there's that. Then there's a movie about the Boston Marathon, in which Jake Gyllenhaal, however you pronounce his name, becomes a guy who loses his legs in the Boston Marathon and has to rebuild himself. And it's one of these post-historical pieces which is used to sell an event and to legitimize what happened. And we know without a shadow of a doubt that there was a drill taking place during the Boston Marathon. Crisis actors were involved. Dave McGowan broke that thing down frame by frame by frame. And the guys that wound up being chased down by everybody, the Boston PD, state troopers, the FBI, the CIA. I mean, they were all tracking down the two brothers to bring them in, and they were patsies. I mean, they had CIA connections. Don't get me wrong. I mean, their uncle is married to a woman whose father was a CIA operative over in, Kyrgyzstan, which is where they're from, if I'm not mistaken. Uzbekistan. It's one of the stands. Anyway, so that was another movie. So we've got the Boston Marathon sort of reframing or planning it into our... See, as we wake up, right, and we're waking up, there are legions of people waking up, and so what they have to do is they have to continue to legitimize these stories and these dramas that are driving the social programming. So that was quite interesting, watching those two previews. I think there was a third. It was like another, oh my God, really, are we going down this path? I forget what it was. Those two really jumped out. The other film was the preview for the Tom Cruise Barry Seal film, which ironically opened just a week before what happened in Las Vegas with Stephen Paddock. And there are people who are making allusions to the fact that Stephen Paddock was a Barry Seal type character. And I've talked about that before already. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to just kind of follow up on these three main threads that we've been working on, or at least looking at over the past few weeks, starting with Las Vegas and then the California fires, and then we'll try to bring in the Harvey Weinstein stuff. I have a story here. This is from the Nevada Independent, and they've got a record of Stephen Paddock having lost about over $400,000 in gambling in 2015. The writer is Matt Kaufman. He is a guest contributor, whatever that means. But I'm going to read this, and this will give you some insight into Paddock's splurge around gambling. It says, countless articles have recently circulated surrounding the gambling habits of Stephen Paddock. Now, remember, they claim that Stephen Paddock made his fortune by playing video poker. If you've ever played video poker, there's no way you can make a fortune off of video poker. Trust me. The most prominent example of media speculation on Paddock's gambling habit was likely NBC News, which on Friday ran a story containing the following information. IRS records show that Paddock was a successful gambler, earning at least $5 million in 2015. Critics of NBC's reporting were quick to point out that the IRS figure is more likely than not to contain earnings as opposed to his net winnings on gambling. Most people then conclude that it would be impossible to know how much Paddock won or lost because we don't have enough information. However, if we're willing to make some reasonable assumptions, we can actually deduce a bit more than that using nothing more than publicly available information and math. So here we go. Follow me on this. How gambling earnings are reported in Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, casino earnings only generate W-2G tax forms when a player receives a single payout of a specified amount, which varies depending on the game being played. For video poker, that number is $1,200. That means a tax form is only generated when a player hits a payout of $1,200 on a single hand of video poker, excluding the value of the wager itself. The W-2G is not triggered when cashing out any amount from a machine. Hypothetically, you can cash out from a machine having won $100,000 or any other number over $1,200 without generating a tax form if you manage to do it without winning $1,200 on any individual hand. The IRS is notified by all casinos of all W-2Gs for each calendar year. Throughout this article, I'll be operating under the assumption that Stephen Paddock's $5 million figure represents the total value of W2Gs that casinos issued to him in 2015. That seems far and away to be the likeliest explanation of the figure. What else can we derive from facts about Paddock's gambling? Be warned, you'll need to understand a basic definition of expected value to be able to understand the rest of this. Skip this paragraph if you already get it. Perhaps the easiest way to think about expected value in a gambling context is that it's the average amount that would be gained or lost over time if you were to repeat an event over and over infinitely. If a video poker machine has a 99% return, the expected value you'll receive when you play a dollar hand on that machine is 99 cents, because the average you'll get back for your dollar, even though you can't actually receive exactly 99 cents on any of the individual hands. Let's outline several details of Paddock's gambling from widespread reporting. He played at the $25 denomination. He played at Mandalay Bay. He hit $5 million in W2G generating events. At the $25 denomination, he almost certainly was playing max credits, 5, for a total of $125 a hand. Many outlets have reported he played for $100 a hand, but anyone who knows anything about video poker would tell you that no advanced gambler would play for less than max credits. Next, we need to figure out how much he really earned. If $125 a hand resulted in $5 million in W2Gs. To do that, let's first look at the pay table for the machine he played at Mandalay Bay. The best return on video poker available at the property at the denomination he played is 8-5 bonus poker with a 99.17% return. So the expected return a player gets back each hand of play is 99.17% of what they had wagered. Playing max credits, 8-5 bonus poker, returning 99.17% would look like this. And there's a graph here. This is from the Nevada Independent. I'll put this in the links because people keep asking me about links. I'll put this in there so you can check it out. So Matt Kaufman breaks down all the denominations, 4 aces, straight flush, what the payout is. So I'll give you an example. If you wager max credits, return credits per credit wager, 800 for a royal flush. Let's say you bet the max. It would be $100,000 in real money received, playing $125 a hand. Okay, so there's all the percentages of returns. So the return percentages taken from Wizard of Oz is the part of the total 99.17% return that corresponds to making each individual hand ranking. So why does the pay table matter? Because we can see that tax forms would only generate when Paddock made 4 of a kind or better. Full houses only pay $1,000 at this denomination. So then he wouldn't generate the W2G, right? Okay, so next let's add up the returns for all the hands that generate tax form. The returns for making 4 of a kind or better adds up to 0.1298, meaning those events happening account for just over 10% of the return on this machine. It also means that they account for 0.10298/0.99166 or 10.384608% of the total expected return of this machine. Note the total return for the machine was previously mentioned as 99.117%, but is more accurately 99.166%. So I'm using the precise number above, and we'll use it again later. That means that the $5 million in earnings that was reported to the IRS is likely quite a lot larger than that. The $5 million reported is 10.384608% of the amount probably he really earned. So here is the big conclusion. If the IRS believes Stephen Paddock earned $5 million in 2015 playing video poker, his gross earnings were probably more like $48,148,182. Of course, that's excluding all the hands he lost. So how much did he lose? On a video poker machine with an expected return of 99.17%, a player only receives that full 99.17% return if they make 0 mistakes. Even advanced video poker players make an occasional button pressing mistake on account of the speed with which they play. But for the sake of argument, let's assume from this point that Stephen Paddock was an excellent video poker player who never made a mistake. If 48,148,182 was Paddock's expected earnings on 99.17% machine, the expected value of his coin in was 48,553,115. He probably lost the difference between those figures minus the value he earned from being a VIP player and receiving comp vacations and possibly cash back in other forms. The $5 million in earnings that NBC reported is quite unlikely to be an exact figure, and therefore neither is this conclusion. But here goes. Nothing. If the IRS believes Stephen Paddock to have earned $5 million playing video poker in 2015, his real-world likely losses was probably about $404,933. But he got lots of hotel rooms, show tickets, meals, and some amount of cash back from the casino. We can still figure out his expected loss per hand was $1,425. And he therefore probably played about 404,933 or 388,425 hands. That's a lot of poker. We've read he played at a very fast pace, but not knowing exactly how fast we can assume he played at a quick pace for a serious player. Video poker forums around the internet suggest 800 hands per hour is a reasonable guess on pace. Using that as a best guess, he probably played for about 485 and a half hours, just over 9 hours per week for that year if it was evenly distributed, although it's easier to imagine 6 separate week-long vacations during which he spent 12 hours a day on the machines. But of course, now I'm purely speculating. In fact, all of the above is speculation. But my response to all the debate on Stephen Paddock's gambling habits is this: let's not remember him as some mastermind gambling winner. It's a much better guess that he wasn't one. Okay, this is what Matt Kaufman, through the deduction of pure simple math, and we'll put this link up on the YouTube page, is that he's trying to establish, without a lot of bias, you can't hear the bias in there, that Stephen Paddock that his wealth and his fortune likely, very likely, did not come from gambling. He was not a gambling mastermind. And if that's the case, then where did his money come from? Well, I think it's pretty safe to assume at this point, based on the connections that we've made about Stephen Paddock, that his money came from what he was doing outside of the gambling world. And the gambling world might have been a very easy and logical front for him to launder said money. Now, we know that he had a pilot's license. We know he had multiple houses all around the country. He had a house here in Texas, in Mesquite, Texas, just like he had a house in Mesquite, Nevada. Unusual, yes, a bit. But apparently he was a hunter, so he liked to come to Mesquite and go hunting. We know that one of his planes had been purchased by a company out of Chantilly, Virginia, which has the same name, or the company has the same name, or close to the same name as a contractor, as a defense contractor. We know that he worked as an auditor for Lockheed Martin. Excuse me. And I was listening to Jay Widener and Jeff Rentz this morning, and one of the things that Rentz pointed out was that Lockheed Martin is the same company that had the Skunk Works program that Ben Rich talked about on his deathbed, where he claimed that not only can we go to the stars, but we have. And he was insinuating that the technology that they have used to get there is all reverse engineered from the disabled craft that they had found. And he said that the link was the space-time continuum. Therefore, all you had to do really was plug into the craft, which was jacked into your neural network and your consciousness. And if you thought you could go somewhere, you would. That's basically how these craft operate, how they fold space-time. Anyway, Lockheed Martin is a big defense company. And if you are an internal auditor at Lockheed Martin, which apparently Stephen Paddock was, then you would have incredibly high security clearance because you would have to internally audit all those books, or you'd be part of a team. It wouldn't just be one person. But you would get information about where money was being spent, who the partners were, offline items, online items, above the line, below the line. He would have information based on that. So Stephen Paddock, when he was working in the defense industry, and he was connected. He had 2 private planes, and of course there's the Gary Danley connection, and Danley living in Arkansas, and we all know that in the 1980s, Arkansas was a hotbed of trafficking going in and out of Mena, Arkansas, for illicit drugs that came from Colombia through Panama. We're talking cocaine and weapons, arms going out because they were basically feeding the Contra rebels who had lost in the election to the Sandinistas, and we were backing the Contras. This is what we always do, and now we've been backing ISIS. And the ISIS factor in Las Vegas, while I don't believe that this was a sole ISIS hit, which is what Alex Jones would like to sell you, I don't think we can rule out the fact that Las Vegas, which has 10,000 Muslims in Las Vegas, might have perhaps a dozen or so people from fighters/men from the Middle East, from the war front in Syria. I don't think it's out of the realm of speculation at all. And if that's the case, then they're war hardened, they're trained, and they're involved in the people. They're involved in the network that set ISIS up. And we all know who set ISIS up. We did. We did it with Israel. We did it with Turkey. We did it with Saudi Arabia. We did it with MI6. And that's how ISIS got created. How do you think they got all those nice new trucks and everything? You know, they had to have a budget. So, again, we're just staying with the whole Las Vegas event because we want to continue to kind of mine this. Now, the other thing is that there are people who said that nobody died. No one died there. I'm not sure Paddock died. I think Paddock might still be alive, although there are people who believe he is dead. That he was the patsy in an arms deal gone bad, which is a scenario which is fairly likely. But maybe he isn't dead at all. Perhaps he was just recirculated. I'm not ruling that out. However, I don't believe that this was a hoax, as in the Sandy Hook or the Boston Marathon, particularly Sandy Hook. I don't believe that this event is like that. I do believe that there were crisis actors involved. I do believe that they were running a drill at the same time that this was happening. My sense at this point in time is that people did die. Now, here's where it gets really tricky, okay? Because we get hung up on the details, and you know there are people that say, well, nobody died. There are people that say, well, people died. Does it matter? I mean, yes, on some level it does matter. I guess the level of grief and empathy and compassion and the emotional investment means something. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be kind of this evolutionary path out of that event, which is, okay, we're going to go after the bump stocks, we're going to come after your guns, we're going to demonize white males, we're going to get rapid scanners in as many places as possible, starting with Las Vegas. I mean, this is how these things go. So to that end, it doesn't really matter if anybody died or not, but you know, out of respect, and I'm holding space here because I've seen some things that to my eyes say that people died, okay? So I'm putting that out there. And apparently, not only that, but there are a number of instances where people's phones, their iPads, computers just wiped by the FBI. So they can't have the damning video evidence. So what will happen next time with something like this is, before there's an event that takes place, and this can be done quite easily, people's cell phones can all you have to do is to do a sweep of cell phones in an area. And they can just shut them down. Just shut them down. That's not that hard. It's not that hard. And so whatever happens in that place, people won't be able to access their cell phones. So therefore, we won't have all that pernicious content floating around about what might have actually happened, because these events tend to be highly controlled, although this one appears to be fairly sloppy in some ways. So we're just doing our best to mine this and to keep this alive, because it is an important event. It's an incredibly important event. Is it more important than what happened in California on the scale of some magnitude? No, it's not more important. The two are not rivaling each other. They're both equally important. So why don't we get into the California piece here just a little bit, because we want to keep this alive as well. So I have people on Facebook, friends who are sending me content and sending me emails about with pictures about what's burned. And I got to tell you, the pictures I've been sent are mind-blowing. And I talked about this on the live stream last night. I mean, it's like when you look at these houses that are burned to the ground or buildings, I mean, all you see is just kind of the rebar. And the rebar is like bent and twisted and distorted, which says that the heat of those fires was almost supernatural. That's how hot they were. And the placement of the fires was so strategic that hardly any of the vineyards got torched and burned. So what do we have? We have houses, we have people that were forced out of their homes very quickly. Very, very quickly. It just happened in a split. I mean, it was like nothing, and then it happened, and then everything was burning. How does that happen? I mean, how does that happen? Fires generally tend to need some kind of build-up, right? It happens, and the next thing you know, we're on to hour 2, 3, 4, and it's growing, it's growing, it's growing. But this happened like a spontaneous combustion in a number of different places. So one of the things that we covered last week was this idea that perhaps these gas lines that are connected to the houses with PG&E, which have been shown to be faulty, perhaps these exploded. Now there are other theories that this was a weaponized event, a weather weapon. Those theories are out there, and look, I wouldn't shoot them down. Because the whole idea, and I talked about this last night, is to move people off their property, private or otherwise. I know people, of course, who are renting there, and they're without a home. Where are they going to go? Where are these people going to go? And I don't think this is going to be the last that we'll have seen. They've got fires raging now in Colorado. That's right. They've got about 100 acres that are burning in Colorado now. So until we get to winter, which is approaching us rather rapidly, there's a very good chance we may see more fires. We may see earthquakes. And the whole idea here is to move people into the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 Emerald Cities, the Emerald Palaces, because this is the movement, the redistribution of population in the United States that's going to take place over the next 50 years to get people off of suburban lands. This whole idea of suburbia is going... Oh, Suburbicon. That was the other movie that they had a trailer for. Suburbicon with Matt Damon. And it's all about sort of this lily white neighborhood. It's directed by George Clooney, of course. This lily white neighborhood, which is turns out to be drug-infested, murderous, duplicitous. Again, it's kind of this hit on a certain type of culture. So that was Suburbicon, the mountain between us, and the Boston Strong. I think that's the name of the movie. Those are the three trailers going into Blade Runner 2049. Anyway, so the whole idea is to move people off of these lands, like this idea that we're going to live in suburbia, we're going to live in our homes, we're going to commute into places where we're going to work at a factory, or we're going to work at a store, or we're going to work at an office. Those days are going away because, first of all, the work is going away. It's been going away for the last 30 years, but more and more and more is going to. I've got a friend here in Austin who told me that they have all these machine shops down in Houston, and they've just been taking the equipment away out of the machine shops. They've got no work. They have no work. So I don't know where the machine shops are going. Maybe they're going to, or the machine equipment is going to China or India. Who knows where it's going? South America. But these guys they're not working. And apparently the 30, 60, 90-day business cycle of collecting, they're out to 90 days now, and people still aren't paying their debts, they aren't paying their bills. I've got another listener, subscriber who lives in Reno, and he was telling me the same thing. That, they were shutting down his place. So we're getting to this point now where the whole idea of work is starting to get into a really precarious kind of sort of position in our culture, and the lack of it is going to manifest. It'll be quantum, right? All of a sudden, it'll be trickle, and then quantum, and then we'll see figures that will blow our minds. And all of a sudden, people will look around. Well, I'm not working. Well, I'm not working. Well, I'm working, but I'm making half of what I made last year. And so this is a planned demolition, is what it is. And when we see these disaster events, whether it's Houston, whether it's Napa, if we get an earthquake, it could be, Puerto Rico. They're going to move people out of Puerto Rico. They're moving. They're coming to the United States. They've got nothing. They've got cash problems in Puerto Rico. The country, it's not a country. It's a protectorate of the United States. They're completely bankrupt. And there's nothing. They have nothing. And they were dealing with insolvency before Irma pushed them right over the edge. So you're going to see waves of people from Puerto Rico now coming into the United States as a result of what happened. So this is all about taking down suburbia, moving people into these megatropolises, which is what they're called, or megaplex cities. And what happens to suburbia? What happens to this whole idea? Well, it's going away, but the houses themselves will eventually get either demolished, or they'll return. The whole areas of the United States, large swaths of land, will return to nature. And what's underneath those tracts of land? Who knows? I mean, I think they know, because they're doing in-depth sort of geoanalysis, and they could do it from a fairly high altitude and look down into the earth. They've got the ability to actually do deep boring and tunnel in there and get imagery. So there could be huge amounts of this country where they're sitting on either oil or uranium or some kind of asset, some mineral asset. In order to access it, you've got to shut down the area that is being occupied on top of those assets. So what we're going to see is bye-bye suburbia. Now, some of this will return to wild land based on, according to their 2030 guidelines. Some of it will turn to wild land. Some of it will actually turn into some kind of industrialized land where they're extracting resources, and then people will be living in these megalopolises. This is the blueprint, and these disasters are used in order to get people moving around. That no place is safe, right? That's the whole idea. No place is safe. What's more important is you and your belongings, or whatever, not your home. So it sets up a feeling of transiency. And being transient is a really, really unsettling feeling. And so I guess at some point you'll just happily take your 250 by 250 square apartment in your local megalopolis and get your craft beer 2 or 3 times a week based on your universal wage that Mark Zuckerberg will grant you as long as you do what you're told and step in line. See, this is what's happening, and it's because when we look at something like California, what did we see? We saw that the resources around these houses weren't even touched. were not even touched. Opus 1, the Rothschilds vineyard, of course, would not be touched. But there are a lot of people who have lost their homes. We have about 40 deaths, and the air quality in California is horrible. I played a football game there yesterday. I mean, come on. We could have played that game in San Diego or Carson, which is where the Chargers have their fan base, and they didn't. They decided to play an outdoor game with the air quality being horrible. You know, this is your NFL. By the way, Colin Kaepernick is now thinking of suing the NFL. He's alleging that the owners are conspiring to not allow him to play. You know, the bottom line is the owners get to pick and choose who they want to play. It's not that difficult. Johnny Manziel, who had a real issue with drugs and alcohol, he can't even get a phone call. Johnny Manziel can actually play football. He's not the biggest player. He's small, slight, but Johnny Manziel can play. I've watched him play. And he can't even get a sniff. Robert Griffin III, the contemporary of Colin Kaepernick, he's not getting a phone call. And the reason why all three of them aren't getting phone calls is because A, it's late in the season, and B, they're not great fits for what teams are doing. Bottom line. And Kaepernick is a distraction. He said that he would stand for the anthem. That's what he said. That's what he said. After he left the 49ers, after he could have skipped my Lou out of there, he said, hey, I'll stand for the anthem. And I thought, wow, man, you made this big deal out of all this. And you're not going to stand for the anthem now? You're going to stand for the anthem now? It's like, where's your... Like he was saying it just because he wanted to be assigned, which I found a little disingenuous. And of course, Trump threw gasoline on a smoldering fire. Now it's blazing. There was a soccer player in Germany that took a knee. Well, I'll tell you what, when they take a knee before a soccer match in Saudi Arabia, let me know, because then we're going to have real news, real history being made. I want to see that moment. So we just don't want to lose touch with the fact that there are people in Northern California that have been displaced. You know, I'm going to try to talk to somebody who I know was there and lost their home, or at least get some notes as to what happened and what they're going to do with their lives after this. And then, of course, the third thread with all this is Harvey Weinstein, who continues to have all these women pile on and tell them, the press, that he raped them or molested them or did whatever he did. This is not unusual behavior. And trust me, it is a lot worse than what's being reported with Weinstein. Now, there is this theory that I believe they were behind the movie Vaxxed. They produced Vaxxed, which is the documentary about vaccinations. So there's a theory that that Harvey Weinstein is experiencing retribution from the liberals because of the movie Vaxxed. I'm not sure about that, although clearly it's something to think about and sort of put into the mix and stir it up a little bit. But I think he's basically, this whole thing is doing two things. Number one, it moved us very quickly away from talking about Las Vegas. And number two, and we talked about this before, it's like we're getting a little bit of the truth. We're getting a little bit of this gristle that Hollywood is nasty and that there are men like Harvey Weinstein who take advantage of women. And yes, that's true. That part is absolutely true. But there's a deeper truth, a more depraved truth beneath that has to do with not just women, but underage women, underage boys. And we know, and we have known for quite a while, that this is how Hollywood operates. That there is a power exchange between the power brokers of Hollywood. And not just Hollywood, we're talking about television, film, the music industry. It's the same game, it's the same racket at the top. And what happens beneath them is a power exchange. And you are beholden to the people who essentially bring you into the circle of fame and fortune and money. But in order to do that, you have to be defamed in some ways. and you have to be degraded. And that degradation can be very mild, watching Harvey Weinstein pleasure himself in front of you. I suppose that's nothing that I'd have any interest in seeing. But that would be a mild form of it. I mean, trust me, there are other forms of it that we're not going to talk about on today's show that are far more humiliating and degrading. And that is really what's lying beneath the Harvey Weinstein affair. Now, why he's been chosen at this time, that's a very interesting question. There's something that he did. He did something in order to piss off his gang members, his fellow gang members. So I don't know what that is. Maybe it was vaxxed. Maybe it was the fact that he was losing money at the production company. I don't know. There's enough sleuthing out there in the world that it will come out. But people have known these allegations for years. So I think they dropped this bomb right after Las Vegas for a number of different reasons. One, it's a distraction. And number two, even though Weinstein is very different than Stephen Paddock in terms of their culture, in terms of their upbringing, in terms of their religious faith. I don't think Stephen Paddock had any religious faith whatsoever. But we all know that Weinstein is Jewish. However, that said, they also, on the surface, look like another white guy, right? So now we have Stephen Paddock and Harvey Weinstein as monsters. And so they're monsters. So it operates at two levels. He's a monster, and at the other level, of course, we're not talking about Vegas as much. So there we go. These are the latest developments in the three stories we've been tracking, and we'll continue to track over the course of the next few days, few weeks. I will make I'll make a promise that I will talk about Las Vegas, even if it's for 5 minutes of the show every day, because we're not going to let this thing go. We're going to keep it alive. I'm doing my best not to just flush it down the memory hole. This is important. This is an important event, and it's an event that can be an absolute pivot for our society, country, and planet. All right, why don't we stop it right there? Before I jump off, I just wanted to tell you about a few things. And the things that I wanted to share with you have to do with my website, robertphoenix.com. So I have a new special. It's not even a special. It's been something I wanted to do for a while. And I've just been waiting to kind of accrue the assets and put together a meaningful offer. I have the 11th House Club, which allows you to check in at 4 different levels with the 11th House Club. And you can go to my website and you can find out all about it. So I've got a really basic offer where you get a reading and you get some reports and you get a discount on the 11th House Academy, all the way up to kind of a deluxe program where I actually come to you and do a reading for you and 4 of your friends. So there's a lot of different levels to check in on. That's on my website. I'll be doing a recording on Friday with Regina Meredith, and I'm looking forward to that. I will not be going to Boulder. It will be Regina and I together, linked via the magic of the digital networks. And we'll be doing that on Friday, and I think that will air the following week. And then after that, on the 28th, I'll be doing a 3-hour webinar over on Astrolata about Saturn and Capricorn. And that'll be very in-depth, and I hope you join me for that. I'm looking forward to working with them. It's my first time working with them. So that's it. Those are the headlines. Those are the hits, as we say. All right. So you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step when it's possible. Thank you for